The Houston regional economy is at a crossroads, especially its energy sector.
Energy nirvana that we produced in the 20th century is not sustainable. A, it gets old. B, it's too dirty. C, it's getting more expensive.
We made money by exploiting natural resources, cotton, timber, cattle, oil. The source of wealth in the 21st century has less to do with natural resources and more to do with human resources. Everybody knows that oil and gas that were the source of Houston's prosperity and the source of America's prosperity during the 20th century is going to become less and less important in the 21st century. The only real question is, how quickly will we phase out? What will replace it?
How and when to move away from fossil fuels affects the Houston economy, particularly since 45% of its jobs are dependent on the oil and gas industry.
I'm convinced that we can manage dirty hydrocarbon energy in much cleaner, more efficient ways so that the license to operate for the future of the energy industry includes hydrocarbons. I think 5-year chunks of time are manageable. It took 100 years to build the infrastructure we have. It's going to take 100 more years to build an alternate energy system, whatever is different from today, whether it's offshore drilling, whether it's onshore refining, whether it's building alternative energy systems, whether it's building environmental protections. It all takes time.
But time is in short supply when we're likely to face new regulations due to climate change and more stringent air, land, and water quality standards, all amidst one of the worst recessions in our history.
There's still money to be made in oil and gas, but we have got to stop our massive dependence on fossil fuels. We've got to become far more efficient in our uses of that energy. And you're going to see big interest as the price of oil goes up in electric cars and in conservation of various ways. As long as we keep oil and gas cheap in America, it's going to increase the use of it. The basic law of economics, what is subsidized you get more of, what is taxed you get less of. If we had the political guts, we would begin to phase in a tax on oil and gas the way every other country on earth does. We provide our country with the cheapest oil and gas in the world. Surprise, we consume the most of it.
If we were to artificially raise the cost of energy, yes, we would use less, but guess what else would happen? We would be laying people off by the tens of thousands. We have more energy than we will ever consume. We'll never run out of energy. We have more sun, more wind, more coal, more oil, more natural gas, more nuclear capability, more biofuel than we will ever consume. What we need is public policy, which enables us to develop all of the forms of energy simultaneously in cost-effective ways, so that when it comes to conservation, that's where technology and the efficiency through technology can assure us that we're using it in the most efficient way possible.
Houston now faces an unemployment rate between 8 and 9%. In this economy, can it begin to reinvent itself for the 21st century?
There's an absolute clarity that environmental goals and economic goals are interdependent, and it is not one or the other. In a time of deep economic crisis, people see those short-term jobs now versus the longer-term transformations that need to be undertaken.
That may mean moving away from a natural resource-based economy to an economy based on knowledge and education.
If I would point to one that I think will make the most difference in the future of energy developments, and it's a big area, it's the whole area called nanotechnology. Nanotechnology is going right down to molecules and designing new materials through the combinations of molecules and the impact that it will have on chemical engineering, on material science, on the prospects of how biofuels, how solar energy, and how the equipment infrastructure can be changed.
One way or another, we're going to be moving out of oil and gas, and the question is with what speed and with what kind of preparation.
Remember, you can call us right now at 713-741-8357. I'll repeat, 713-741-8357, or participate online at houstonpbs.org/haveyoursay. To start the discussion on securing our energy future, we have with us Dr. Praveen Kumar, Director of the Global Energy Management Institute of the University of Houston's Bauer School of Business; Jim Blackburn, an environmental attorney and Rice University professor; Pat French, Senior Vice President of the Texas Alliance of Energy Producers, the largest statewide oil and gas association in the country. He's also the president of the Foundation for Energy Education. And Walter Ulrich, President and CEO of the Houston Technology Center. Now, each one of you, thank you for coming, have 30 seconds to tell us your point of view about securing our energy future. Dr. Praveen Kumar, we'll start with you.
Okay, I think in the short to medium run, we need to move away from our petroleum-based economy to the natural gas-based economy. And the reason for that is that although we all love to sort of move away from the fossil fuels, the fact of the matter is that most of the renewables, from a technological and economic standpoint, simply are not in a position to even satisfy a small fraction of our total energy consumption needs. The thing with natural gas is it's the cleanest of all fossil fuels. I mean, 40% lower carbon footprint than petroleum, 78% lower carbon footprint than coal, much lower emissions of particulates and the nitrogen and sulfur compounds. But the more important, I think, issue here is that because of the shale gas production revolution in the last decade, we have actually gone from a near natural gas importing country situation to a natural gas exporting country situation. In other words, the supply of natural gas is going to be plentiful at a relatively lower cost. So to my mind, the real issue in transitioning and securing our energy future is the innovations that are needed to allow us to absorb this cleaner fossil fuel. For example, in particular, the personal transportation sector, because as far as I can see, we are going to be heavily dependent on petroleum on that.
We'll be talking about that. Mr. Jim Blackburn?
Yes, I think sustainability is a long-term goal that we as a country should shoot for. And that requires the combination of environmental thinking, economic thinking, and social concerns. Whether it's natural gas, whether it's some type of oil, whether it's coal, or other renewables. The issue is whether we balance social, economic, and environmental goals. I don't think you have an economy if you sacrifice social and environmental in pursuit of jobs. We have to have balance. I don't hear much about conservation, and I think conservation is a wonderful energy alternative. I don't think anyone's figured out how to make money off of it yet. If we could figure out how to make more money off of it, we'd have conservation. But I think that we need a full kind of spectrum of alternatives, and then we ought to try to balance that. I'm worried in the long term that we are building a false economy, that we don't pay the full cost of our alternatives, and I think we've got to address climate change or we'll be left behind by the rest of the world.
Mr. Pat French.
Well, I think that as we move into this century, and we've all heard it said that one of the greatest challenges facing us in this century is going to be finding adequate and reliable energy supplies. I don't think there's any disagreement with that statement. We're going to need a broad portfolio of energy sources, and oil and natural gas, fossil fuels, including coal, will be the dominant energy sources for at least the next 30 years. Several things that we're concerned about with my organization. Public policy is going to be critical to securing an energy future on everything from access, both offshore as well as onshore, to the issues that we've been talking about here today, air quality, water. There are a whole range of issues. But in addition to public policy, public education is going to be absolutely critical. And that's gaining real emphasis in the oil and gas community today. Frankly, it's something that we should have been doing a long time ago, but we've got to build a bridge with the public. We've got to build a real partnership with the public. Today, for example, in the Barnett Shale, we're talking about urban drilling. We're talking about oil and natural gas operations impacting local communities. It's absolutely imperative that the industry get out there and ensure that people understand what oil and gas is all about.
Thank you very much, Mr. French. Mr. Ulrich?
Patricia, I very much agree with my three colleagues on the panel and also with John Hoffmeister in his remarks. What we need is an absolutely complete and robust portfolio of energy fuels, taking the maximum advantage and reducing the impact of the fossil fuels and working over a very long time for new technologies and new forms of fuels. At the Houston Technology Center, our middle name is technology, and so our perspective is that technology will, given time, make an enormous difference. And our first name is Houston. We want to make sure that Houston stays the energy capital of the world, not just upstream, midstream, and downstream, but in clean fuels, renewable energy, remediation, and smart grid.
And we do have a phone call, thank you, Mr. Ulrich, from Sheila, what is your question, please?
My name is Sheila Brown. I work with schools in the area of Houston, and I'm interested in the level of commitment from these companies to the children of Houston.
Okay, Mr. French?
Well, through the Foundation for Energy Education, for example, we are partnering with the Offshore Energy Center, which has an absolutely excellent school education program, K through 12. We help primarily with the 5th grade program, which is a mobile learning unit that goes from school to school here in Texas that teaches children interactively about oil and gas. It's specific to oil and gas. And it's also specific to the 5th grade here in Texas. There's actually an energy component to the curriculum in the 5th grade, and we're doing that all around the state.
Now, yes, Mr. Brown.
Let me respond real quickly. I just did a survey at Rice University, and in terms of cities, the number one criteria that we found by comparing across a number of surveys around the country, the educational quality in a community was the number one thing that was looked at by companies and by others in terms of, do we have a viable community? So I would say the challenge is the extent of the involvement of the corporate community in a really high-quality education system within Houston, not just about oil and gas, but about whether the kids are getting educated. Our dropout rates are horrendous, and we've got to change that.
We have 50% dropout rates. That is a crisis.
My name is Janice Richards. I am a student here at the University of Houston, the Bauer School of Business. I'm president of the Energy Club. And as a current student and as a citizen and as a worker in the energy industry, I would like to hear the thoughts of the panel on ways that citizens can be more involved to assist with the agendas and the solutions that you are coming up with for some of these problems.
Since you're talking more about the future here, Mr. Ulrich, tell us about the new technologies, because that's really what's going to be essential to really move slowly away from fossil fuels, right?
Well, absolutely. I congratulate her on her seeking her degree from the Bauer School. It's a great way to make an impact. And at the Houston at the Houston Technology Center, we have over 200 active volunteers that work with us. So we're looking for volunteer support all the time. But that's only one of many ways. There's a program called Lemonade Day, which helps people get young people involved with entrepreneurship across the board. All of the major oil companies in the community have programs for which to enlist people who are interested in supporting it. The future technologies, John Hofmeister mentioned nanotechnology, are going to change the way that we get energy out of the ground. It's going to change the way we transport energy. It's going to change the way we protect energy. For example, when nanotechnologies and nanotubes get inserted in blowout preventers, they may prevent the kind of accidents that we've seen recently in the Gulf of Mexico.
How much time are we talking about here? 10 years, 50 years, 100 years?
Well, you know, nanotechnology just celebrated its 25th anniversary, and there is now work underway to put nanotechnology into elastomers to do that very thing. Less than 5 years for that particular one. The big impacts on transmission are 10 years, on fuel efficiency maybe 15 years.
Excellent.
I'm David Crossley with Houston Tomorrow. And I think that while we understand we're going to take a long time to get to some new sources of energy that we don't have to burn, that Jim Blackburn is right that conservation is what we have to do. We have to sort of use less for a while, but I will argue with that people have figured out how to make money doing that. And it is by building walkable urbanism, walkable cities where people don't have to drive miles and miles and put out emissions that hit both of these problems of air quality and energy, not to mention their own personal household issues. We drive more than anybody else in America here in Houston, Texas.
Thank you. We have a question from Melissa. Melissa, what's your question?
Hi, my question is, with more and more oil and gas being found in, let's just say, the east side of the world, with Australia and Southeast Asia, and with countries such as China and India booming, how do we see both the U.S. and Houston competing in the oil and gas market?
Thank you, Melissa. Very good question. Would you like to take it, Mr. French?
In terms of competing?
I think it is in terms of competing. Or probably demand. I mean, we have these emerging economies demanding a great amount of oil and gas. And
well, you know, obviously there's no question that as the global economy recovers, that we're going to see demand recover as well. The U.S., in terms of our production, oil production, obviously at this point, nearly 40% is imported. That's going to be, to a large degree, hopefully, balanced with greater natural gas production. And so most of the energy that we produce here in the U.S. is going to remain here in the U.S.
Eric?
Thank you.
You're with University of Houston?
My name is Eric Edmonds. I'm with the University of Houston MBA also, and I work for Water Standard, a seawater desalination company for the offshore industry. Two members of the panel mentioned shale gas, so that brought the question up. Now in California, in Pennsylvania, the big story is shale gas using the horizontal fracturing. When they inject the water, it actually seeps into the water table, and members of the Pennsylvania community are crying foul because they end up drinking bad water. In as much as we want to convince the public that these new alternatives are going to be the solution that way into the future, I am all for shale gas. But how do we do the balancing act? How do we get people to buy into the whole shale gas process when a simple process like horizontal fracturing can derail the whole thing?
Mr. Blackburn?
I would offer, at least for starters, that regulation is a key. And really effective, serious regulation. And I think it's also the answer to the question about global competition. If we can't safely get to these resources, and if the public doesn't have faith that it will be safely done, we're not going to take those resources in the long term because it won't happen politically. So regulation is a key to my mind.
I'm Bethan Santos with Santos & Associates, and I just want to follow up on what David said and also your comments in the panel about having a suite of solutions, basically several different types of fuels and technology. I just want to remind us all that there's one thing that doesn't cost that, and it helps us with our air quality, and that's energy efficiency. We really need to be looking at that as a state and as a country, and we have lots of opportunity here in Texas in terms of becoming more energy efficient. So I'd like to hear a little bit from the panel about that.
Dr. Kumar.
Yeah, actually, there's a theme that sort of embraces a lot of what's been said here, which is the importance of knowledge generation. And this is basically, again, sort of attracts attention to the importance of actually investing in not just from the schools, but even in higher education, not just the technology, but actually the business and the intermingling of the business and the technology about innovation. So you mentioned the hydraulic fracturing and those issues. You're absolutely right. In the short run, we can take care of that through regulation, but in the longer run, we're going to have to invest in the innovation. That's going to be the only answer. So, for example, in the Bauer College, I mean that's our whole in the Global Energy Management Institute. Our whole purpose is to actually marry the business aspect with the technology aspect, so that what we are actually are producing are people trying to get a critical mass of actually people who have knowledge of the technology, but also understand the sort of the commercial and economic challenges of actually developing those technologies. And going back to the efficiency question, what I was actually going to get back to that was that in order to do those innovations, you're going to need people who see some benefit, as David said earlier, who see some actual personal benefit in developing those efficiency, because there's a market for that. and and they can actually develop those innovations and market them. And until we actually have a critical mass of those people, that is what we really need to move this thing forward.
What concerns me, what you said was, your students are learning technology, they're learning economics. The other day I saw a bumper sticker that said, "Stop global whining." If we don't think about the environment and we're only thinking technology and the economy, then isn't that a challenge for us?
No, not really. I think it really depends on what you're emphasizing in the teaching. I mean, when you teach economics, it's not necessarily that you're saying that the only thing you worry about are profits. Actually, what you're teaching when you teach economics, what we are actually doing is actually talking about how do you do things in a cost-effective way? How do you do things so that the program doesn't have to depend on permanent government subsidies, for example? Right. That's what I mean by when you marry technology with economics.
This is for Dr. Kumar. A major part of our demand is in liquid fuels, which is primarily from oil. Do you see natural gas as an alternative factor to move into that market?
Yeah, actually, I mean, there are two things. I think in the short run, what might happen is that more and more the shale technology is moving from dry what was called dry shale, which was only gas, to liquid shale, which is where you get actually liquids through that. So I think in the short run, that's going to be the answer. But I think the longer run answer is, Again, it's an innovation challenge. For example, personal transportation right now, you cannot use natural gas because we just don't get that compression to have a safe driving experience. But it's only one or two major innovations away. And we have seen, if you go back to the microchip revolution, the software revolution, we have seen those innovations in the past. So it's not that, that's totally unprecedented. So that's.
Go ahead.
Marcy Zlotnick, StarTex Power. As a retail electricity provider, we speak to the customer every single day, and their concerns are really mostly about price. So who's going to pay for some of this new technology? Is the appetite there to help subsidize wind generation, for an example, when people are so concerned with price? And how are we going to move forward to that balance?
Very good question, because renewables apparently are not yet profitable. Who wants to take that question?
Well, I would just simply say that, while I think consumers are primarily focused on price, I do think that there are certain things that we should encourage. We ought to set up funding mechanisms, public funding mechanisms for conservation, for efficiency. I would love to see utility districts created within the city so that homeowners could get loans to weatherproof their houses, could do things like that. So that's the type of subsidies I see for goals like conservation, and that's what I would push.
We have a question from a caller. What is your question? Caller, Steve?
Yes.
What is your question, Steve?
I found with Port of Houston being one of the economic leaders for the city of Houston, what is their main initiative for air quality?
What is their main initiative for air quality?
We have the main person in the Port of Houston.
Port of Houston, right there. The Port of Houston, yes.
Hi, I'm Dana Bloom, the Environmental Affairs Manager for the Port of Houston. Thank you for your question, caller. Our main initiatives are to provide a sustainable environment, economy, as well as a community to live in. Some of the things that we're doing, mostly from an air quality perspective, are to reduce our emissions from all of our diesel equipment. We've encouraged the EPA with their ECA program to do, through the IMO, to do fuel switching on vessels, as well as retrofitting on-road trucks, the 18-wheelers you see up and down the roads.
Thank you.
Jen Powers with Sierra Club's Beyond Coal campaign, and this is addressing the issue of pricing from an electricity standpoint. If we can move beyond coal, and coal has to actually accept the cost of its pollution that it spews into the air right now, the coal ash sites, the ozone, the mercury, which causes huge public health effects, then we can see from a price standpoint, a cost analysis standpoint, that natural gas generation, solar generation, wind generation, they are cost competitive.
Mr. Laverne Williams?
Yes, this is, so many, it has to do with technology. I'm Laverne Williams, with Environment Associates Architects. I'm a green architect and a building ecologist. But so many of the technology and our laws in the country don't deal with unintended consequences. Just like this gentleman was saying about fracturing for oil, and it was ruining water supplies, groundwater supplies. What is being done nationally to implement some laws that address unintended consequences?
I would start off that cap and trade and some sort of climate change initiative would be one way of addressing it, and that clearly hadn't gone anywhere. But that's the type of unintended consequence that comes to mind, where we have CO2 emissions that cause what will be, I think, global disruption of an unprecedented scale.
But so many people are saying stop global warming.
I understand, but every scientist that I've dealt with at Rice University, the people that I respect, every one of them says the science is solid. The Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Control, the IPCC, has worked for about 20 years now. It's good science.
And I know that the City of Houston is taking this seriously because we are number one and we have with us...
We're the number one purchaser of renewable energy in the country for all municipalities, and we're number 4 in the country when you add in private business. I'm Laura Spangen, the Sustainability Director for Mayor in East Parker. And the comment about how renewable energy is way more expensive and people can't afford it, I think is a myth. It's really, renewable energy is starting to come down, particularly for wind. Our wind contract, we actually buy our power at 7.5 cents kilowatt hour, and before that, with all fossil, it was 7.1 cents. So it was absolutely affordable and competitive. And I think that's happening more and more for wind. I think a couple other comments I just wanted to make. You know, the comment earlier about social, economic, and environmental, those 3 sort of legs of the stool really need to be there when you're looking at initiatives and looking at programs. Everything we do at the city is really trying to look at it from those 3 levels. That what you're doing not only helps the environment, you're saving money, and it's socially acceptable, and you're trying to change the social fabric of your city. So when it's our sustainable food policy that we're doing to encourage people to buy local and grow local, you're reducing truck emissions and plane emissions by sending your food over from overseas and other parts of the city. When we're talking about electric cars, no one's brought up electric cars. People keep talking about natural gas. We're not going to see CNG cars on the road probably ever, but electric cars are here and they're coming in literally in a couple months. And that technology is literally it's affordable. And they drive like normal cars, and they also improve the environment. You do not have tailpipe emissions. So those, I think, are a way for us to move forward. The last thing I will say is that when it comes to offices and greening, the question earlier about greening your spaces and what can citizens do? You can green your office building. You can green your home by doing energy efficiency improvements. The city's offering money for things like that so that you don't have to worry about the upfront capital, that you can actually pay for your energy efficiency improvements through your savings. And that is something that's one of the things that started in Houston, and it's catching on across the country.
Did you say money? We have a phone call. We have a phone call from Martin. Martin, what's your question?
Hi. When we have a governor and a TCEQ that wants to protect oil companies in the name of jobs, we're not going to advance on the policy that requires big oil to significantly reduce emissions. The same companies in California run at lower emissions, much lower emissions, and haven't moved overseas. The only reason we don't have lower emissions here is because we let them. The big oil needs to cooperate in reducing emissions now if they want to maintain a politically acceptable energy source in the United States. So my question is, what kind of grassroots movements to protest big oil's emissions here can we lay people get involved in to put political pressure on big oil?
Would you like to?
Yeah, Walter Ulrich. Laura and I just this afternoon came from a meeting where the mayor was represented, Congressman Culberson was represented, several of the major oil companies were represented, and the caller should take comfort in knowing that the major energy companies are absolutely committed to clean and renewable energy. Yes, they have businesses to run, and part of those businesses have to do with petroleum products, which we will need for many years to come. But each and every one of them is making significant investments in clean and renewable energies.
I would just say Sierra Club, Environmental Defense Fund, Airlines, Houston are all groups that are working. I do think there needs to be a citizens lobby and a grassroots movement, because I don't think it's happening in Texas without it.
Just to follow up on that, if I may, this is not just big oil, but here in Texas, the bulk of this industry is made up of small, independent producers, companies with under 10 employees. And they are conscious about air emissions. For example, up in the Barnett Shale area, Fort Worth, Dallas, air quality has been a key topic up there for the last 6 months. We now have new air emission monitors up there. You can monitor air emissions 24 hours a day. So this is something we're as an industry, taking very seriously.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Kaido Tiwala. I'm with Q Environmental Incorporated. Our specialty is sustainable environmental solutions, which is we basically pick up and recycle used motor oils, antifreeze, petrochemicals, etc., for example, from the city of Houston, Houston Metro, etc. And what we are not looking at is that whilst we are talking about having restrictions on the oil and gas and the energy industry in the United States, the world is not going to have the same restrictions on it. And so there has to be a balance between the requirements and the restrictions we put over there. For example, I'm coming back from a meeting.
I'm sorry, we have to end it there, but we'll keep discussing it after the show. And if you have comments you would like to share with the community, join us at houstonpbs.org/haveyoursay. We thank you for watching and for participating. As with everything we do at Houston PBS, it's not possible without viewers like you. On behalf of all of us here at Houston PBS, thank you for watching. Our whole show and an additional half hour will be posted on our website tomorrow night. Thank you.
Production funding for Houston Have Your Say, provided by Sterling Bank, world-class banking, deep Texas roots.
For a transcript of this program, send $6.95 check or money order to the address on your screen. Include the name of the program and guest in your request.